I had a belief from when I was 20 that if all I did was walk out this door with a shirt that's on my back, I will be okay. I'll figure this out. And to be able to have that conviction and that belief in yourself is probably the most powerful thing that I've ever had.
Hi everyone, I'm your host Rohit Bhargava, and you are listening to episode 176 of the Startup Playbook podcast, a weekly series where I sit down with successful tech founders, investors, and operators to unpack their journey, lessons, and insights to help current and future entrepreneurs. The voice that you heard a little bit earlier was that of Luke Anear, the founder and CEO of SafetyCulture, and our guest for this episode. Luke is one of Australia's most successful tech entrepreneurs. In 2004, he started SafetyCulture out of a garage in Townsville in what was initially a lifestyle business, before conversations with Scott Farquhar and Cannon-Brookes, the co-founders of Atlassian, helped convince him to take on venture capital funding. What started off as a checklist app for the construction industry has evolved into a fully fledged operations platform for businesses all around the world. In 2023, they raised a $34 million funding round at a valuation of $2.7 billion. In this episode, Luke shares a lot of his lessons and insights from his journey so far, including some of his early life and businesses, including leaving school at the age of 16 to start a glass recycling business, why your first idea is often not your best one, what Scott and Mike said to him to convince him to switch from a lifestyle business to a high-growth startup, how his role has evolved from the founder of a scrappy startup to the CEO for a high-growth multi-billion-dollar company, and much more. But before we get into this interview, just a few quick notes from me. So for those of you that are watching along on video would notice that there's a slight change in background, and that's because we recorded this interview at South Start. A big thank you to the team for having me along to speak at a few sessions and for helping tee up this interview with Luke. Secondly, for those of you that have followed this podcast for a while would know that many years ago, I was involved with bringing a B2B SaaS accelerator program to Australia. One of the biggest challenges of startups back then, as well as what I'm seeing in portfolio companies that I'm investing in now through Playbook Ventures, especially those that are selling to large enterprise customers, is how challenging, time-consuming, and difficult it can be to obtain your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 compliance. These certifications are so important in building credibility and trust with large enterprise customers, but can be such a big distraction and operational drain for early-stage companies. Thankfully, there's a tool to help with this. Vanta helps businesses get and stay compliant by automating up to 90% of the workflow for the most in-demand compliance frameworks. There's over 6,000 fast-growing companies that use Vanta to manage their risk and prove their security in real time. To watch a 3-minute demo or to speak to a local team member, head over to vanta.com/playbook. And finally, Sender is the OG startup accounting firm in Australia, catering to all stages of your business life. If you're busy running your business, you don't have the time to do your own books or your own forecasts, and instead you can fully outsource your finance function, giving you the time and resources back to do what you do best, which is focus on growing your business. They have a dedicated focus on founders, funders, and startups, and have an experienced team that can help you with support and advice from everything from balancing your books to managing your tax to even helping with your exit strategy. I trust and use them with all of my businesses and can't speak about them highly enough. To find out more or to speak to Gareth and the team, head over to sender.com. With that out of the way, and without any further ado, here is my interview with Luke Anear. Hi, Luke. Welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Hi, Ro. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. It's been a long time coming. Very, very excited about this interview. Luke, for those people that may not be as familiar with you or your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Yeah, sure. Grew up in Townsville and I guess left school when I was like 16 and started in business, had a whole bunch of things that didn't work and finally something did.
Very humble way of putting it. But yeah, maybe starting at that point of deciding to leave high school to start a business when you were 16. From what I understand, it was a glass recycling business that you used to take bottles from pubs and bars and stuff.
That's true. That was the first business I started, Townsville Glass Recycling. And I was 16. I would drive around in my brother's ute with a trailer and I would pick up all the empty bottles from nightclubs and bars and stuff. And also people who had lots of empty beer bottles at their houses, mostly alcoholics. And I would then take it and sort it for trains, basically to take it down to Brisbane and melt it down. So I'd sort the coloured glass from the clear glass. I had a few friends who'd come after school and that would help as well. I think I was like paying them $5 an hour or something. And I think in total I was probably getting about $450 a week in revenue, and I was probably costing me about $460 in wages and everything. So
yeah, amazing. What was that like? Was that a I guess, did you leave school to specifically go after that business opportunity, or
No,
how did that go?
I just didn't love school. I was from a pretty early age. I can remember like grade 2 or 3. I was just smashing through the maths books and stuff for the year pretty early in the year by March or April, and then got bored with the whole thing. And so somehow I lasted year 9, I think was the last exam I sat, and then I just hung around for year 10, a bit of year 11, and probably just had to grow some pubic hair or something, I don't know. And then I actually just left and got a job working a palm farm, digging up palm trees for a bit, and then got a job at a service station. And one of the customers at the service station was a guy who collected glass from places, and he was retiring. Yeah. And I don't know how he was even surviving, to be honest. But I said, well, yeah, that sounds like a great business. Let's start that. So I took over from him.
Amazing. And from what I understand, you were a PI for a while.
That's right. Yeah. So I worked for Bill Smith in that service station business and another service station for a while. And then I just wanted to get out of Townsville. And so I got a job in the paper in Brisbane as a trainee surveillance operative, doing investigations, spying on people basically for insurance companies. And so, yeah, took the job and became a PI. And yeah, it was a pretty cool job.
Yeah. And I know that you've mentioned Bill was a very sort of early mentor for you and shaped a lot of how you view things. Would love to understand what some of those sort of early experiences of running the glass recycling business and as a PI, and just maybe even some of the lessons from Bill at that early stage. Like, how important was that for you, and what were some of the lessons that really stood with you from that period? Yeah,
so I grew up with my mum. My dad lived in South Australia, and I grew up with mum. And she just worked at Telstra and was an administration clerk. So I never understood anything about business really, but I understood that money was a source of stress for my mum and that we never really had much. And so I guess I started to take an interest in that and try and read some books and things and just old classics. And I guess I started to find things that hadn't changed over time. And now we live in a time where change is happening every day. But I still find myself asking, what are the things that aren't changing over time? What are the things that stay true? Customer satisfaction. People want a great experience. They want something to be delivered as soon as it can be, rather than delay my delivery for as long as possible. No one wants that. And so I think I started to learn about that stuff through books. I could get access to people who'd done amazing things. And then once I met Bill, he was this incredible kind of business mentor with just the fundamentals of business. He started a car wrecking yard with a $5,000 loan from the Commonwealth Bank and paid it back in 10 months. It was like a 5-year loan back then. And he just explained how he did everything himself and figured out how to help customers and solve problems. And so that kind of, I guess, gave me the belief that you don't actually have to be anything amazing to solve a problem for people. And if you solve a problem for lots of people, that's really valuable to them. Yeah. And so Bill gave me those fundamentals, just simple things. He was like, if you can save $1, that's better than making $1 in some ways. And today I probably think about it more from a growth mindset, but if you make $1, you have to pay tax on that. If you save $1, you don't have to pay tax on it. And so there was just simple things that he would talk about. And on Saturday mornings at the service station, it would just be Bill and I. And I would just ask him all these questions about how he got started, how he paid back this loan in 5 years, and how he raised his kids while he was trying to do all that. And so I think that gave me my first sort of business mentor. And Bill was very much someone that I looked up to for a long time. And I stayed friends for 20 odd years. And I started to show him what I'd done from his advice, which I think was really rewarding for him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so much of especially early experience, I feel like we don't normally get that a lot in Australia, of just having a lot of that business mentality around those sort of things. But having someone like Bill exposing you to that sort of space and giving you not just a part to doing that, but almost, like you said, giving you belief that it's even possible by seeing other people do that, probably enabled you to go after some of these things as well.
Yeah, and just trying something. You're never going to be guaranteed a success, but you're never going to know if you don't try. And so I think the more you try, and you learn the most from failure. Like, success teaches you nothing.
Yeah.
The failure is what teaches you everything. And so unless you're prepared to start trying and failing and figuring it out, then you're probably not going to work it out anyway. No one hits it out of the park the first time they turn up and have a swing. It's like you've got to go through the process of trying to figure it out. The first idea is never the best idea. It's always the 10th iteration of that. And so I think that's probably what it taught me, was just try. Just go and have a go. Townsville glass recycling was my first attempt to try and do a thing called business. And so that's probably the most important ingredient, is most people stop before they try.
Yeah. And so what did that sort of catalyst for the very first version of SafetyCulture look like in identifying the idea and deciding that it was the right thing for you to go after?
Yeah, I had looked at lots of different businesses and watched people like Gary Vaynerchuk. He was doing wine reviews, and he wasn't really a wine guy. His dad had a wine store in New Jersey, but he was doing wine and talking about wine in a really different way. He did 1,000 shows where he was tasting wine every day. And so I would see these people who are creating a business or creating a following from doing what they were passionate about. And so for me, I did 7 years in the end in the investigation industry, and I saw 2,500 people who'd been injured at work. And so I thought, I want to solve this. Every single investigation that I was involved in, we'd get this massive file from the doctors and everybody, the insurance companies. This is what's happened to this person. And I'd read it and think every single one of these things were preventable in hindsight. And so I thought, well, no one wakes up with the goal to hurt themselves at work or to do a bad job at work. Everyone innately wants to do well. It's part of how we get self-esteem. And so I thought, well, maybe I could help people do a better job each day. So the very initial beginning was giving people safety procedures and training procedures to be able to do their jobs well. And it was focused initially just on the Australian construction industry. So if you were going to work on the roof of a building, you needed to have what they call like a work method statement. And so I was hiring ex-government inspectors to write these documents for like $1,000. They would charge me, and I'd put them online for $80 each, and people would buy them. And so that was how the business kicked off.
Yeah. So I spoke to Rick Baker from Blackbird. He's been on the podcast before and is an investor into SafetyCulture as well. One of the things that he mentioned as a key bit of insight for SafetyCulture was a lot of the traditional kind of methods of these safety procedures was from the top down, which was a business manager would find something, they'd push that down to people. And even though it was helpful for them, they would hate doing it because it's just administrative work that they just didn't really enjoy. But he mentioned that one of the key bits of insight for SafetyCulture and the success of the business has been flipping that and doing something from the ground up and having engagement just because of the buy-in that you get from your end users. How did you land on that, and how early was that realization for you in terms of that's the right approach in building this product?
So this is back to my point about the first idea is never the best idea.
Yeah.
This is a classic example of that. So we were creating safety procedures for people to be able to use in their business, management, owners, whatever. And then in 2009, I got a call from the New South Wales regulator, and they said, we have an incident where a 19-year-old by the name of Marcus Wilson has died putting roofing insulation into a house. And the company he worked for used one of our documents for putting roofing insulation in and said they trained him on how to do that. And they wanted to know when we sold them that document. And when I had a look, I realized they'd bought it 2 days after he died. They'd forged his signature and then gave it to the regulator and went, this is what we trained him on. And he didn't follow the procedures. And so that experience changed my life. So that was 2009. I then spent 2 years thinking, okay, compliance and getting a signature and management pushing procedures, that is not the goal here. And best practice, what do the best teams in the world do? That much higher goal. And the best teams in the world don't wake up each day and say, let's legally be compliant. They wake up and say, how do we build the best product or the best customer experience? And so I started to think about, well, how do we help teams do that? Compliance is the minimum standard for society. So what if we were creating a tool or giving the teams the ability to be able to do their best work each day? And I had to dumb it all down to a common, I guess, thread that went through every company. And it was like, well, pilots use checklists and doctors use checklists. So maybe everyone could use checklists. Trained people in society could benefit from it. Then perhaps someone working in a Subway store could as well. And that's really, I guess, that was the tipping point that you were talking about with Rick Baker. And that's where we became a technology company. Everything changed from that day.
Yeah, I had Alex Zatarain from the co-founder of 8 Sleep on recently, and she spoke about how the very initial way that they went out to market on the Indiegogo campaign was as a smart fitness company, and they realized that there was a bunch of competition coming in, and the much bigger opportunity for them was in the sleep fitness space and rebranding, repositioning the company. I guess for you, it was, again, from what I understand, it was SafetyCulture sort of started as more of a lifestyle business that was doing really, really well. And then you have this inflection point to switching into a technology company, which I imagine comes with a lot of changes that happen both in terms of like how you talk about the company, but also I imagine from a team perspective as well in terms of the skill set that you need and all of those sort of things. First of all, how do you decide that it's the right path to go on as a founder? And then secondly, what did that sort of transition look like from switching from a more traditional business into an online tech business?
So first thing I'd say is definitely a lifestyle business, but it wasn't doing really, really well. It was doing probably 800 grand a year, and I had 2 staff. So it was a good business, but I was spending probably $300 on AdWords a year and stuff like that. So it was making maybe, a couple of $100 grand a year, but like amazing. That's what people earn today, and, a salary, in a lot of jobs. So I think for me, it was about how do we keep solving a bigger problem? And so I did a lot of things between 2004 when I started and 2012 when SafetyCulture launched its first app and became a tech company. And most of those things just didn't work. I built a training platform in 2007 and no one used it. I built a document management platform in 2008 and no one used that. And it was just failure after failure. And so the overnight success is, we started this business and then made an app and it was all amazing. The reality is that I was trying for years to figure out how to do this in a better way. And then once I realized the iPhone only came out in 2007, there's no app store till 2008. We were dealing with frontline workers. They didn't carry iPhones around with them. This is 2010 and 2011. They were just starting to. And so I think timing is really important. You've got to time your product with a market that's ready for it. If you're trying to educate a market on why they should use your product or go and buy it, that's expensive. It's a long road. If you can time your market, there's a great scene I remember in The Simpsons where, a guy on stage called Steve Mobs working for a company called Maple and wearing a black skivvy, and he's standing there and he says, "Our next product is," and all the crowd grab their credit cards and lean forward and they're ready to buy it even before they've announced it. That's the sign of a company that knows what a market really needs. And I think when you start thinking about how do you help solve these problems for customers, your customer's never going to tell you the next product to build. They'll tell you what's wrong with your current one, but they're not necessarily going to innovate and help you get to the next one. So I think the company really transformed from that sort of time onwards, where we went from trying to convince people that they should use safety procedures and saying, hey, this is a good idea, you should help your teams work better, to releasing an app and having people from all over the world download it and say, wow, this is amazing. We're now inspecting our airplanes with it and this has changed the whole way we work. I'm like, where were you guys yesterday? And so I think about if you're going to take a product to market, how do you create something? Dare Jennings taught me this, who created Mambo. I met him and he was explaining how when he created the fashion label Mambo with Reg Mombasa, surfers didn't have an identity off the water. On the water, they were part of this kind of culture. Off the water, unless you had a surfboard on your car or under your arm, who were you? And so the original poo shooter, Mambo shirts and stuff, that was part of giving them an identity off the water. Then he's done it again with Deus Ex Machina, which more people know today with the brand Deus and all the rest of it. It was giving 40-something-year-olds who worked in an office during the week the chance to go to a cafe on Saturday mornings and ride little bucket races and wear clothes and stuff that kind of said, we're part of this group. And so I think there's a lot to be said for being able to understand the cultural sort of memes and feelings of a market and then position your product right where they need it. And that's a much easier business to build than one where you're trying to educate a market.
Definitely. I think timing's such a critical part of that. But I know as founders, you have such a grand ambition and view of what the future will look like. I know you were on another podcast recently where you spoke about AI being on your roadmap a long time ago, and it's only now that it's coming into fruition. For founders who are in that position now, how do you gauge whether the market is ready for you? Are there particular things that they can do to validate that? Or I guess what are signals that you look for that now's the right time for this?
They use your product. Innovation isn't enough on its own. Adoption is what changes behavior. So people have to use your product. And you need to keep innovating and keep figuring it out until people start using it, until you have an audience, until you have a customer base. Until you do that, you haven't figured it out. And so you might think your product is amazing. You often meet founders who are in love with their technology. They think, I've built this amazing thing. It's like, well, what do your customers think about it? And so disruption comes from adoption, not from innovation. Making the thing is part of it. Getting people to use it is the most important part.
Love that. I know, so going back to that sort of transition from the early iteration of the company to becoming a kind of tech business, part of that process, and we've referenced this a little bit earlier, but was taking on investment and capital. From what I understand at that time, you didn't really know what VC or fundraising was.
That's true.
And having spoken to Rick, he said that he got introduced to you initially through Michael Fox, who you met.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Oh,
right.
Wow. There you
yeah,
go.
So
that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, he said that Michael met you at an event and that...
It would have been a Google meetup at the pier somewhere down in Sydney.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, breaking news here.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said that the kind of initial few meetings with you, it was clear that you didn't really want to take on capital at that time.
I didn't understand it. I've come from Bill Smith, works at a servo, and got a $5,000 loan from the bank, and here are these guys from Sydney rocking up saying, hey, we want to give you some capital to help you do this. And actually there's a story where I actually was at one of those meetups, might have been the one that I met Michael at, and I pitched it to Bill Barty, who was part of the original 3 of Blackbird. And yeah, he definitely didn't seem that interested. And so I got the first pair of Google Glass in Australia. So in 2012, I think, when Google Glass first launched, we got the first pair in Australia. I had it on at a tech conference somewhere in Melbourne, and a journalist came up, and next minute we're on the project on Channel 10, and Blackbird, Rick or someone saw it. And I guess if you're on TV, then it must be good. and so next minute Rick had reached back out and said, hey, we'd love to have a chat. And I'm sure Rick tells a different story, but that's my story. I'm sticking to it. But yeah, Rick turned up. I came up to Townsville and said, we love what you're doing and we'd love to be involved. And I was really suspicious. I was like, so to set the scene, we're on an acreage block outside of Townsville where no one really goes. And in my sort of double garage, that it was my mum's house that I'd rented off her and then eventually bought, and here we were in the garage, and this guy comes down, and I said to everybody there's 6 people I think working for us, 2 were probably part-time, and I said to them, like, make sure you're wearing shoes, like, we've got a venture capitalist coming. I'm not sure what that means, but it's important. And so Rick came and got to know us, and then he introduced me to Mike Cannon-Brookes and Scott Farquhar. I had to do a 1-hour video call with them because they were the main contributors to the original Blackbird fund. I think it was like a $27 million fund or something, and Mike and Scott had to vet anyone. This was the first time they'd spent their maximum amount on a company, which was $1 million. That's all they could put in. And so it wasn't until I spoke to Mike and Scott that I went, wow, there is a lot to learn here, and these guys know a lot more than I ever will. So that's what changed everything for me. I was like, yeah, okay, we'll take investment and let's build a company.
I want to come back to the Mike and Scott conversation, but one story that Rick mentioned was that when he came up to your garage, there were a bunch of clocks that started peeling off the walls. You want to share a little bit about that story?
Yeah, so I would respond to customers in the different parts of the world, and I wouldn't know what time zone they're in. So I'm always Googling it, saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, hi, thanks for contacting us at SafetyCulture. And when Rick was coming, I was like, you know what, we should put clocks up on the wall with the city underneath them, like Tokyo and London and Los Angeles, and so that he understands we've got global customers, because that would be the difference, right? $7 clocks from Kmart. And so we raced out, got these $7 clocks. Angela, who was working with us, she went and got them, and we put these clocks up with double-sided tape on the wall. And so I'm trying to impress Rick with this amazing business that we're building and all these users, and in the background Tokyo just falls off the wall and smashes on the ground, and Rick says, yo, your clock's just fallen down, and I'm like, that has never happened before, which was a true story because they only just went up. And then the team, I found out later, they were messaging each other saying, someone grabbed London's about to go. And so they had a little meeting in the Blake and Alan, that they ran out into the garden shed where my lawnmower was, and they're in there going, we've got to find some glue or something to get these clocks up and hold them on the wall. It was a circus, but unfortunately Rick didn't actually care about the clocks. All he cared about was our customers.
Well, he actually said that he got the impression that you were trying to give, which is you're a much bigger company than you were, but he actually 100%. Loved the fact that you guys were scrappier. That was what kind of drew him into. There's
only so much you can do from a garage on country, rural acreage in Townsville to impress someone, and yeah, we certainly did all that we could.
And so maybe jumping back to that conversation with Mike and Scott from Atlassian, I know you've referenced this before, that it really changed your sort of outlook on business. What was, if you're able to share, like what was just some of the things that were said or shared with you during that conversation that shifted perspective for you and felt like kind of going down that VC path was the right thing?
There were many things. I think Scott certainly leaned in and said, I'm happy to help you in whatever way you can. And yeah, I think when Mike and I started talking, Mike's this visionary and got these amazing ideas, and we almost talk ourselves into the clouds kind of thing. And whereas when I started talking to Scott would be like, well, hang on a minute, have you thought about this? And very practical and analytical in his thinking. And so it was a really good balance. And first of all, I would say he took an interest in me personally, and he would say the hardest part of this journey will be for you to personally grow at the rate of this opportunity. Like let's just be clear. You think you're trying to solve all these problems. The hardest part is going to be for you to grow and be the person that needs to evolve in order for this to continue. Otherwise, you're going to get spat out the side of it. And he always cared deeply for me, firstly. He was there to help me. And I was just very, very lucky. I think it was just a time in Scott's career where he didn't have the profile that he has today. The Australian tech scene was still in its early stage. And so I was just very, very lucky that he was willing to invest time and help me. And I wanted to be a good student too. I think people ask about how do you find a good mentor and things like that. The only reward really for a mentor is to see you do something well. And so we wouldn't have this regular catch up every week or anything like that. It was just, I would go to him with a problem or things I was struggling with, and he'd help me figure out a way out of it or solve it. And then my job was to go away and apply that. And I wouldn't come back unless I've shown him here's what I've done from what you told me last time. And I think that's a really powerful thing for people to understand is the reward for a mentor is to see you do well and apply what they've shared with you and learn from it and make it even better. And so I was very fortunate. I was probably maybe 6 years where Scott regularly was helping me, and he still does, but it was a very formative time for me, and I don't know where I would have ended up. I became friends with Cliff and Mel, but very much with Cliff at Canberra, and we were all sharing our journeys. And here was Scott and Mike who were way further along and were able to help us navigate a lot of that. We were very, very lucky.
Yeah, I feel like it's not really spoken about enough in terms of the evolution that happens inside a company of not just growing, but as you said, especially the role of the CEO kind of evolving and changing over time as you go from a team of 6 people to hundreds of staff. You recently raised $34 million at a $2.7 billion valuation, which is absolutely incredible. Congratulations on everything you guys have achieved. But I guess from when you talk about growing with the opportunity, what does that specifically look like for you in terms of how your roles changed and evolved? And if you can share, what are some of the things that you've had to learn and develop over that journey?
Wow. The first thing I'd say is you need to have a compelling vision on where you're going. And you need to be able to articulate that in a way, and I feel I'm never good enough at this, but you need to be able to articulate it in a way that gets other people inspired to want to be part of it. And then the second thing is you need to care deeply about those people that are on the journey with you. And I think taking an interest in knowing the people and knowing them well. The best CEO that I've ever met is Craig Tiley, who runs the Australian Open. He cares deeply about his people. He wants to know them. He'll remember what they tell him years later. And the same with the players that come and things. And so I think learning how to make sure that you're caring for people, which sounds, I guess, a bit cliche and a bit easy, but you have to get good at that. One of the things Scott taught me was to have more elegance in how I communicated. Often as a founder, you're very passionate, you're very driven, and you're frustrated, and things aren't happening how they should every day. And often that energy and that passion comes through in an abrasive way or in a forceful way. And that gets people offside. And I did that and still do that at times. But I think I learned to be more elegant in how I communicated and to pause and take a breath. And I'd done a bunch of other stuff as well. I was Tony Robbins' videographer for 4 years and flying around the world and working with monks and stuff like that. And I think a lot of that stuff started to come back too, where you learn about just being present with someone and not having an agenda or just being able to properly listen and hear what people are saying and respond to that rather than reacting to things. I think some of those sorts of things started to come through, and I was able to temper some of the passion and some of the frustration and the drive with, I guess, a more balanced approach. And that then starts to take you into an area where you can try and help others unlock that for themselves. It's hard to give someone what you haven't got. And so you then can try and tease that out in other people and unlock their potential. I think so many people, most of us, we don't realize what we're capable of until we really get challenged. And I'm lucky now that I'm in a role where I get to challenge people in a positive way and unlock their potential and help them discover that. And it doesn't always work, but that's, I guess, part of what I've learnt to do for myself. And you hear of founders, there's a lot of expectation on founders. You've seen as you've got to be all these things, particularly in this day and age. Your opinion can sway the public perception of a whole company and all these kind of things. And so I think that is unrealistic, and the pressure that's on founders to be this kind of all-round perfect person is just not realistic, and people need to come to terms with that. But there's definitely, I think the opportunity as you build a company to think about, are you doing this for you or are you doing this for others? And I think if you're doing it for yourself, then it's easy to get caught with this kind of narcissistic or very much ego-driven type of experience where you're trying to build this thing and make it as big as you can make it because that's a reflection of you. And that can work to a degree, and there's plenty of examples where that has. But for me, I've always thought about, how do we make this sustainable? How do we make this stand the test of time? And for that, the motivation needs to be, I think, something that helps other people be better, whether it be our customers or our team. And I never wanted to be a CEO. I didn't even really want to build a big company. I just wanted to solve a problem that I cared about, that I thought was worth solving. And it's got me to here. And it feels like we're just beginning. There's a lot to do. So I think it's easy for people to get distracted by money and all these kind of things. The irony is that if someone wants acknowledgement or praise or recognition or money or success, if all you do is solve a problem really well, then all those things that you wanted, they come, and they come disproportionately. And so, I think that's the message, is don't try and go after the sugar and the quick hits and those sorts of things. Just focus on doing something well, and hopefully it makes other people's lives better in some way. And if you do that on a big scale, then you don't have to worry about anything else. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you feel like you're not ever good enough on the storytelling piece, because Rick said Luke is still one of the best founders telling the why and sharing the heart and soul of the company. And he said this one of your kind of superpowers as a founder and was evident from day one. I see this a lot with a lot of founders, especially if they're building deeply technical product. They just get in the weeds of what it is that they're building versus finding it really difficult to actually share the story and the why around this. Do you have any resources or tips for founders in terms of how they can really effectively capture that message to then share out to not just their market, but also to potential talent joining their team?
What I'd say is that technology generally improves humanity across the board for the most part. So I think if you're building something, you need to understand what is the ultimate human benefit of this. And if you do that and there's a human benefit, well, then you can attach an emotion to that. If it makes people happier, or if it makes them meet friends and connect or build better relationships, or it helps them improve what they do each day and that improves their sense of self-worth and value, whatever it is. But my sort of approach has always been, if you can connect people emotionally to a problem and they're smart people, then all you need to do is support them to be able to solve it. And so I would take the team to Kathmandu, and we'd go and meet people who'd been impacted by the earthquake, or the Sherpas that climbed Mount Everest, or we went to Chile and Santiago and met with Mario and the miners that had been trapped in a mine for 69 days, 33 miners, And I had the benefit of 2,500 investigations where I saw people get injured at work, but my team don't have that experience. So I think, how do I give them a similar experience? So I would take them on these trips, or I'd bring people in to talk and share their journeys, and people then emotionally feel compelled to want to do something about it. And we're fortunate we were in a space where it actually has a tangible benefit to people's lives. And so I think about, I saw the movie Deepwater Horizon on a flight, which is about the oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico that caught fire in 2010. 11 people died, and there's about 140 odd people on the rig, but there's 12 people in the drill shack where the explosion happened. 11 of them were the people who died. And I watched this movie and I was on the plane kind of crying and thinking, God, this is why we do what we do. And I got off the flight and I asked one of the team and said, can we find someone who survived that? And so we found Caleb Holloway, who was the 12th person of the drill shack. His 11 workers died. And I played the video in Townsville because we only had about 50 or 60 people in the company probably in 2017. And here was this guy from Texas who'd never been out of America. And after the movie, where they showed the 11 people who died, that the actors Mark Wahlberg and everyone had played, in walks Caleb. And he then told his story. And I still get goosebumps and I think everyone who was there remembers that. And so I think about how do we emotionally connect people to what we do. And I think whether you're sending satellites in space or whether you're giving people the ability to be able to read books more or whatever, there's a human impact to most things. And so I usually try and find that.
Yeah. Again, from what I understand, you have a very customer-centric approach. So everyone jumps on the helplines to speak directly to customers in your team. How intentional is some of that sort of stuff to give people that sort of...
That used to happen as part of onboarding. It doesn't happen anymore. I think we should bring it back. But I do hear that we are customer-centric. I hear people who join us from other companies, I won't say who, but great big companies and lots of fun companies, but they say, we've never experienced customer centricity like this. And so I think we do a reasonable job of having the customer at the forefront of everything we do. But I think it's easier to solve problems when you're doing it for the customer rather than for investors or for whoever. And so we don't have revenue metrics that we go after. We have user metrics. How many people do we impact every day? We think about that, and that's what kind of drives us. So I think that's all part of how you motivate a team and drive a team.
And talking about teams as well, like I know that you've been really big on offering secondaries to your staff as well as a way of kind of rewarding them. Secondaries come with oftentimes a lot of risk for people to jump in earlier into startups, but obviously, especially at a company of your size, that's a really additional benefit that you can provide. Do you want to share a little bit about how you think about that structure for your employees?
Well, I think Australian tech is now getting to a point of maturity where we're starting to see more of that with Canva and obviously Atlassian and others. So it's a really cool thing to see the companies that do make it to that point where their equity becomes life-changing for people. There's plenty of examples where people take equity in a company and it doesn't go anywhere. And so it is a risk. That is absolutely a risk. But if the opportunity is great enough and the team is good enough, then they are able to exercise the value of what they've built. And it is life-changing for people. People often ask me, what are the proudest, the most memorable moments of building SafetyCulture? And there's always two. One is when I remember a team member sent me a photo of them hugging their family and their kids saying, we just paid off our home thanks to SafetyCulture and we'll never owe the bank any money again. Mum and dad are debt-free. And other people saying we've been able to have another child now, which we wouldn't have done because we would have both had to go to work and things. And so that sort of stuff I think is pretty cool. And the belief builds. Back then in the beginning, the likelihood of that happening is very low. And I think as the company gets bigger, it becomes more successful, then the belief that this is possible. For us, we're still at the beginning of this journey. We are tiny compared to where we can be. And I set the goal in 2022 to make the company 100 times bigger, our user base 100 times bigger by 2032. And we're well on track to do that. So if we do that, then people who are joining today are still going to they could see a 60x or 80x, whatever, on whatever they're allocated. But I always say, if you want more equity, it depends on two things: responsibility and impact. If you significantly increase your responsibility or you significantly have a greater impact, then that's a time when you should have more equity. And so we encourage people to want to go after that. And it's an amazing thing to be part of. But I think what you'll see over the next 10 years will make the last 10 pale in comparison in terms of what it creates for people. It's disproportionate. And I feel a responsibility with that for us to help people understand how to be a steward of that as well, because just getting a lot of money can be a bad thing for people. And we had a lawyer in the Philippines who joined real early, and they wanted a salary of $12,000 a year. And I said, look, I'm not going to pay that. You're doing some good stuff for us. I'm going to pay you $28,000 a year. And even that is way less than what we pay you in Australia. And after about 18 months, they contacted me and said, I just need to let you know I've got to resign. This has ruined my whole life working here. I've never experienced money like this before. And I buy all this alcohol now for my family. We're drinking and life's gone upside down and I need to change my whole life. And that really gave me a shock. And so I was like, wow, we have a responsibility that as we help particularly young people who might get allocated equity and then over the course of 10 years it becomes life-changing, we need to help them understand what that means and how to manage that so that it isn't a problem for them, because it's going to happen over the next 10 years. And we've seen it in the US, and there's people who have had negative outcomes from some of that. So it's stuff that I never thought we'd have to deal with, but here we are.
Speaking of that belief, I heard you give a talk where you spoke about a VC wanting to put in 250 mil and you didn't need the money at the time. So you thought that you'd offer that to secondaries to kind of team, and you could only muster up about $8 million.
$8 million,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. So that was Insight Partners in 2021. So we've had people wanting to give us money a lot as it goes along. And that's common, I guess. People are always trying to find good companies. But what happened in 2021 was Insight Partners said, we want to give you $250 million. They had a $12 billion fund or something. They're like, we can't write checks for $20 million. It would take us all day, sort of thing. So we didn't have a need for that sort of money. And so I said, look, I'll ask around and ask everyone who wants to sell, employees and investors and stuff. All I could get was $8 million. And so I think we took 30 odd million or something into the company and we moved on. This is the first time, and I sent a message to the team at the end of last year. This is the first time really where I said, this is the time for us to really double down. We launched our new platform in October, which meant we went from a single checklist app type company to now a company that everyone on a team uses. Our big deals were like 5,000 users a year ago. Now we're seeing every month 40, 80,000 users being added for companies. And so the whole thing's changed, and it's evolving pretty quickly. So we'll see what happens the next 10 years, but now feels like a time where we will probably take a few $100 million in capital, and we'll be able to deploy it very well.
Yeah. And I think even that journey is really interesting as well, of obviously the evolution from a checklist app to now being a best practice platform.
Yeah.
Again, for a lot of founders, they can have that vision, and there's that risk of trying to boil the ocean and not really making any meaningful kind of progress along that at all. Again, for any founders that are at those early stages and trying to understand how they think about their priorities and they focus on this, do you have any advice on how they should think about that from the very beginning, and when is the right time to start expanding that out further? Do
one thing well. And it may not be easy to do one thing well. So keep going and iterating and changing it. The first app that Alan and I made was terrible. I think we had 70 downloads or something. No one used it. And so we had to change it and iterate. And then we released iAuditor, and that straight away took off. But do one thing well. You can't try and do too many things. You have to focus and then iterate. And once you get traction and you get that thing working, like we had that one thing working really for 10 years before we then put a whole bunch of things together. It doesn't mean I wasn't thinking about what's next. I'm always thinking about what's next and these other things, but the primary focus of our resources was in doing that one thing well and keep doing it better and better, while I'm placing some side bets and doing some other stuff. But we just couldn't drop the ball on the one thing. And so that's the key is just focus, do one thing well, and then you'll get creative license to be able to try some other things. People will give you that bandwidth. But if you're trying to do lots of things and none of them are working, then people will give up on you.
Yeah. Speaking of creative license, like way out of left field, but one of the fun things about doing research on you was discovering your background as a rally car driver as well. And we were speaking a little bit about you had this accident in Spain last year. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Not really. So Scott Farquhar said for a couple of years, when I moved to Sydney in 2017, I didn't really know lots of people other than through work. So I was kind of lonely. And I said, for a couple of years, he kept saying, you need to see my coach. I've got this coach, Michelle. She's awesome. And I went, no, I'm too busy. But when I got to Sydney, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go and see your coach. And she interviewed like 14 people in my life, personally and at work, and laid it all out on the table and said, this is your life. This is who you are to these people. This is what they love about you, and this is what frustrates them about you. And it was amazing. But one thing that was clear was that my whole life was work. And I paid a big price for that in terms of relationships and my daughters and stuff. And so she said, you need to do something else. And what's it going to be? And so I remember we used to drive around in $50 cars in the paddock as kids. And so I went and got a rally car. And that became, I guess, an outlet for me. And it was funny because the work, I think, I described that as perpetual incompetence. Every day I'm doing the thing I'm not good at. Because as soon as I figure out how to do something, I hire someone who's better than me and they go and do it and make it even better. And then I go on to the next thing I don't know how to do. So every day I'm doing a job I don't know how to do. And this was the first time in a lot of years where I got in a rally car. And I think the first rally I went in, there was like 60 cars or something. I came 8th. And then the next one I came 5th, the next one came 2nd. And I was like, wow, this actually feels good. I was like, this is something I feel like I can do. And so, yeah, I did some stuff in the World Rally Championship in 2022, 5 rounds of that. And there was a moment where it was a night stage going up a hill, and there was a guardrail the whole way up this mountain. And then there's one corner, for whatever reason, didn't have a guardrail. And I just happened to slide off the edge of it and got stuck on the side of a mountain. It was pretty precarious. We kind of just slid. 200-meter
drop.
Yeah, we slid just very slowly in the dark at a really steep angle. And we just slid, and then for some reason the car just kind of stopped. but there was nothing holding it. And I had to keep my foot on the brake for 52 minutes until they found us, and then the fireys like abseiled down and stuff, and making it sound dramatic, but it was really not that bad. The co-driver and I got to bond a bit and talk about things, and we were just hanging out until we got out.
Cracking jokes. I think it's I think for a lot of people, especially the founder journey, can feel like life and death in those kind of moments, and there is huge amounts of stress that you go through. But I think in that actual moment when you do have those sort of things, I think it was really interesting how calm you seemed in that setting. I'm sure you were losing it on the inside. Again, just advice to founders that are doing it tough at the moment and feeling like the world's coming to an end. Do you have any advice in terms of like how you handle sort of pressure and stress and all of those sort of things?
A long-term view always helps. If everything's short-term, then it's very reactive. Cycles come and go. Things come and go. And it's great. There's one thing about, I guess, experience is that you learn to not react too adversely to change, because change is a constant. And so markets come and go. 2020 we had COVID come, and no one knew what that meant for the world. And that's where my early point around thinking what people worry about what changes in the world, but I focus on what doesn't change, what remains constant. And so those things give you a sense of calm, because you don't have to guess the next thing, because it's not going to change. And so if you're building a business around the constants of life, then that's a much easier way to think. You might be applying a brand new technology or bringing AI or whatever, but the end result of that should deliver something that people universally are going to want for a long time. And so a long-term perspective helps. And the other thing is, I always tell myself, nothing is permanent. Everything is temporary. So if it's really, really bad, it's not going to last. Well, something will change and it gets good again. But also, if it's really, really good, something's going to change and it'll get bad again. And so this idea that everything has to always be good and you're feeling up and you're always on top of things, that's bullshit. Like it's not permanent.
Yeah.
Things are constantly changing. So I think not reacting to the stuff that changes all the time is key, and taking a long-term view on what doesn't change and is something that you can build a business around makes it much easier to navigate.
Amazing. So Luke, one of the big challenges that come with scaling kind of companies is how do you keep engaging your staff? And a large part of that is, as you said, growing yourself as a CEO, but also growing your team members and the people around you. How do you and SafetyCulture as a company think about that?
Yeah, look, I think like everyone has so much more potential, and as you're a leader and as we scale, we've got to unlock that potential in people. And you can have leadership academies and we do all this kind of stuff, which is awesome. But at the end of the day, the only way you learn how to lead is to do it. You're not going to get out of a book. And I remember Tom, one of the team members that worked for us, he was a really smart guy. He'd been a lawyer, had worked in banking, and he came and pitched this idea to run all of our IoT business. He was working in our finance team, but he said, I want to run our IoT business. And after about 20 minutes, it just was like missing something. It just wasn't quite hitting the mark. And so I just randomly, I'd never done this before, and I don't know why I did it, but it worked. And I just grabbed a whiteboard marker and wrote like 7 columns on the board and gave them random headings like vision and strategy and ability to confront difficult things and a work ethic and EQ and all this stuff. And then gave him the pen and just said, score yourself out of 10 on all these things. And he was like, oh shit. And so he gets up there and he gave himself like a 9 on work ethic, which I thought, yeah, I probably would too. You're a hard worker. But on strategy, he gave himself like a 5. And I was like, why is that? He said, well, I'm probably not the best at coming up with really crystal clear ideas and stuff. And I said, yeah, I probably agree. So I looked at it and chatted and I said, would you hire that guy on the board to run your global IoT business? And he said, yeah, probably not. And I said, yeah. I said, the reason you're weak on strategy, for example, is because you haven't got the nuts and bolts thinking of how to build a business. There's a tangible kind of grit to that you just got to go and figure out. And so either go somewhere else and build a business. And that meant we risked losing someone really good, because Tom's awesome. Or I'll give you a 90-day challenge. I'm literally coming up with all this on the spot. And I'm like, I'll give you a 90-day challenge. We have these $200 fridge sensors to alert people if the fridge is in wrong temperature. I'm like, yeah, how many of these have you sold? The team sold in the last 12 months. It was like 80 grand or something. I'm like, okay, cool. You, on your own, go and sell $100,000 worth of these $200 sensors in 90 days. That's the challenge. Up to you if you take it. And he was like, shit, all right, yeah, I'll take it. And so he walked out. The poor guy couldn't sleep, didn't eat. He was stressed. His wife worked at SafetyCulture. She hated me. And a few days in, I'm like, you got to do everything though. Figure it all out yourself. Logistics, manufacturing. Can they supply? Like all this stuff. It's a lot of senses. And so a few days in, I said, how you going? And he said, oh, yeah, okay. I said, AdWords, you got AdWords? You're doing landing pages? Like, you're getting customers in North America and like restaurants, they need these things. Like, how are you doing this? And he said, yeah, the marketing team's getting AdWords ready tomorrow. And I said, like, marketing team? There's no marketing team. This is an individual challenge, Tom. You're it. You're doing the AdWords. You're doing everything. Get our Shopify account set up. If you need to do it through another website, do that, whatever. He's like, oh, shit, okay. And so away he goes. And we kept in touch over the next few weeks and checked in. But he rang me on a Sunday night at about 7 p.m. and 10 weeks into the challenge. And so I just want to ring you and let you know, no one's ever done that exercise you did on the board where we mapped stuff out on got me to say what I was good at. And he's like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I've done like $340,000 in sales in these $200 sensors in 10 weeks. He still had 2 weeks to go. He was in tears. He's like, this has changed my whole approach. I know how to build this business. I've installed 200 of these things in Hoyt cinemas around Australia in their ice cream fridges. He's like, I know exactly what we need to do. He was a completely changed person. And he asked me a little bit later, he said, I want to share this with the team. I said, yeah, sure, but make sure you include your personal experience in this as well. So we stood up and showed people screenshots on us coming back and forth at 10 o'clock at night and stuff. And he's phenomenal. And that unlocked a side of him that he didn't know he had. And so I think part of building a company and leading is to help people unlock that part of themselves that they don't know is there and build something amazing. So
yeah. And so part of that piece is obviously giving people the opportunity to stretch and extend themselves, but there is a fine line between
going too far
around that as well. How do you gauge that balance?
It's tricky. You just need to try and trust your intuition. It's easier when you've pushed yourself a long way. When I was 20 years old, took on this crazy tough man challenge to sleep in my car. I set myself a goal to make $40,000 in a month. I was earning $700 a week as a private investigator trainee, and I quit that job and went and decided to do a tough man challenge in Darwin, slept in my car and had absolutely no way of pulling this thing off. It was like ridiculous goal. And I was going into the Holiday Inn or the hotel on the Esplanade and unplugging their swimming pool filter at 10 o'clock at night and plugging in my phone so I could ring people during the day and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I did it. 1,500 people turned up and I made $42,000 in 5 hours and took in 60 grand, cost me 24,000 something to do it, whatever it was. And so I had a belief from when I was 20 that if all I did was walk out this door with the shirt that's on my back, I will be okay. I'll figure this out. And to be able to have that conviction and that belief in yourself is probably the most powerful thing that I've ever had happen. And so I can see the limits a bit, I guess, in people because I've seen where they are in myself. And most things I've tried haven't worked, by the way. That's probably where I've learned the most, right? We learn the most from failures, not success. And so you're trying to create experiences for people where they're going to learn a heap of stuff. They might fail a bit, but ultimately it'll lead towards their success. And I think that's the role of a leader. Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely can attest to learning so much from failure as well. And I think almost feeling like you've hit rock bottom and going, actually, rock bottom isn't that bad. I also made it through it. And if I don't want to go back there, but if I had to go back there, it's like you said, it's not that bad in a period in time and you pass through it. And I think for me anyways, that kind of instilled a bunch of confidence. If you just go, well, rock bottom, you've been there, it's not that bad. It's okay to take on a bunch of risks and those sort of things. But yeah, I guess in terms of that self-confidence for yourself, where did that come from for you?
My mum was my number one fan, and for no good reason. She just thought, try anything, do anything, and see how you go. So I was very lucky, I think, that she gave me this probably false confidence, naivety. I think, when I think of Cliff and Mel and others, and probably even Mike and Scott, I think naivety, not knowing what we don't know, is actually a massive superpower when you're starting a business. And so it just comes back to trying. Just try, go and give it a go, and you'll probably be surprised by what you can achieve.
Amazing. Luke, I can speak to you for hours about your journey, but I know that I'm holding you up from your next session. Just want to say a quick thanks for all the impact that you're doing and even just the work with developing the Founder Series as well, and just being so generous and open with a lot of your journey and lessons and insights. So yeah, really, really appreciate it. And thanks for making the time to be on the podcast today.
Thanks, Ro. Thanks for having me on, and congrats to you too. 175 odd episodes. That's incredible. So congrats, and I hope there's another 175 and more to come.
Hope so.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
Thanks for listening to episode 176 of the Startup Playbook podcast. As you may have heard from the last episode or seen via LinkedIn, about 18 months ago, I launched an investment syndicate, Playbook Ventures, to invest into pre-seed and seed stage deals. Our goal is to become the best early stage investor into high growth startups that I believe will become the next unicorns, like SafetyCulture from this region. So far, the investors in the syndicate have been many of the incredible founders and operators that you would have heard on this podcast over the last 7.5 years, as well as a select group of people from my broader network. To date, we've had some incredible results for the 7 companies that we've invested in our portfolio, with the acquisition of the very first company that we invested in, another company, Kismet, that we recently had on the podcast where we invested 12 months ago at their pre-seed round, that recently announced their $12.5 million seed funding round that we also participated in, as well as winning allocation to highly competitive rounds, such as one recently where we won allocation to a deal that had 3 times the amount of committed interest for the amount that they were raising. So I'm excited to announce that we're raising a rolling fund to double down our focus in investing into exceptional founders going after ambitious opportunities at the earlier stage. And today we're opening up that opportunity for listeners of this podcast. So if you're a founder currently raising your pre-seed round and would like to talk to us about your business, or if you're a sophisticated investor wanting to invest into high growth companies, you can apply to invest directly with us. To get in touch, head over to playbookventures.com.au, or you can email the team and me directly at fund@playbookventures.com.au. It goes without saying, but this information is shared for information purposes only, and the opportunity to invest is currently only available to sophisticated investors. Investing in this space is high risk, and as always, you should do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions. Thanks once again for tuning into this episode with Luke Anear. I'll make sure everything that we discussed, as well as all the links, are included into the show notes for this episode at startupplaybook.co. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime, if you enjoyed this interview, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.